Hello and welcome. Find a comfortable place to rest, somewhere you can feel the weight of the day begin to lift from your shoulders. Perhaps you can hear the soft hum of a fan or the gentle sound of rain outside your window. Tonight, we are not chasing headlines or hurrying through stories. Instead, we will journey together into the deep, quiet corners of the past, into the shadows where history holds its breath. We'll walk the silent halls of forgotten castles, listen for the whispers of a Serpent Queen, and lose ourselves in a maze of myth and stone. So dim the lights, close your eyes, and let your mind drift. Our journey begins now. Part 1. The Shadow's Price. The Life of a Medieval Assassin. Chapter 1. The Unchosen Path. Let's be clear. In the grand, muddy tapestry of the Middle Ages, no one woke up one morning and chose assassin as a career. It wasn't a guild you joined or a trade you apprenticed for. It was a final, desperate stop on a journey paved with misfortune. The men in, they were almost always men who found themselves holding a dagger in the dark, were not enigmatic loners from mountain-top temples. They were society's ghosts, disgraced soldiers whose honor was shattered, peasants who had lost everything to famine or plague, or thieves whose only skill was moving without a sound. If you had wealth, you didn't become an assassin, you hired one. If you had a title, a plot of land, or even a healthy goat to your name, you were in management. But if all you had was a reputation for solving problems quietly and the ability to slip through a crowded tavern unseen, then congratulations. A corn purse was about to be slid across a grimy table, followed by a whispered name. And it was never an easy name. Chapter 2. The Training Ground of Survival. Forget the romanticized images of candlelit training montages, wise mentors, and the soft melody of a flute. The only training a medieval assassin received was the brutal, unforgiving education of survival. Your classroom was the labyrinth of city alleys at midnight. Your teacher was the cold sweat of fear. Your final exams were the moments you almost didn't make it out alive. Most were desperate amateurs, relying on a crude sense of direction and the desperate hope of not sneezing or hiding behind a tapestry. Military experience was a bonus that meant you knew which end of a knife was for holding. If not well, stabbing is grimly intuitive. The true art was escaping afterward with your life, a skill learned not through practice, but through sheer, dumb luck. There was no manual, no safety briefing. You learned how to spot a nobleman's escape route by clinging to a window ledge, praying you hadn't just broken into the laundry room again. Chapter 3. A Purse of Lies. What lured you into this life? The promise of coin. Cold, heavy, life-changing coin. But the reality was you were paid in lies. The person who hires an assassin wants a one-time transaction with no paper trail and, ideally, no surviving witnesses including you. The offer was always the same, half now, half when the job is done. But when the job is done was a delicate code for after we're sure you haven't left a trail back to us, and long after you're likely dead or gone. You would risk everything, moving through the shadows to extinguish a life, only to return and find your client has vanished. Or worse, they'd try to silence you permanently. A knife in the ribs is a cheaper final payment and a bag of silver. Even when you did get paid, it was never enough to wash away the blood, the fear, or the 3 days spent hiding in a flea-infested haystack, wrestling with your own soul. Chapter 4. The Fortress of Paranoia. You weren't paid to eliminate the town drunk ... or the sleepy candle maker. Your targets were men of consequence, powerful nobles, corrupt bishops, or decorated generals. And these people lived inside fortresses of paranoia. First, the guards, not 1 or 2, but dozens armed and armored, their eyes scanning every shadow. You'd spend days just memorizing patrol routes, the distinct creak of a certain door, and the precise moment the night watchman with asthma needed to catch his breath. Then, the walls. Castles weren't built with welcome mats. They had moats filled with stagnant, murky water, sheer stone faces, and murder holes directly above the gates. And finally, the target himself. He was paranoid, and for good reason. He didn't eat without a food taster. He didn't sleep without 3 locks on his door. He might even sleep in a decoy bed, a deadly game of musical chairs played out in the dead of night. Getting close was a mission in itself, a slow, patient dance of deception that could take weeks. And when the moment finally came, you had one chance, one perfect, silent, ghostly moment to succeed. Because failure meant becoming the next gruesome ornament, swinging from the castle gates. Chapter 5. An Unremembered End. Let's say you succeeded. The dagger found its mark, the poison worked. You vanished back into the night. Your reward? Erasure. Your name was never meant to be recorded. At best you became a rumor, a hooded figure, a stranger with cold eyes. You could have single-handedly altered the course of a kingdom, and your only legacy would be a mysterious death in the official chronicles. That was the point. Your client wanted plausible deniability. You didn't sign your work. You didn't brag. You didn't exist outside the kill. And there was no retirement. Assassins didn't fade into a quiet life. They vanished or they died. Even if you walked away, your past was a ghost that followed you. You lived in a state of perpetual watchfulness, a ghost pretending to be a man, until one day you simply weren't there anymore, and no one would question your absence, because no one ever truly knew you were there in the first place. Part 2. The Serpent Queen. The Reign of Olympias. Chapter 1. The Princess of Prophecy. Before she was the feared Queen of Macedonia, she was a princess from the rugged mystical lands of Epirus. Her people claimed descent from Achilles himself, and she was steeped in prophecy and ritual. She was not a princess who embroidered tapestries. She was drawn to serpents, omens, and the frenzied ecstatic rites of the cult of Dionysus. Ancient sources written by men both terrified and enthralled by her claim she kept sacred snakes in her chambers, allowing them to coil beside her as she slept. To her allies this made her divine. To her enemies it made her dangerous. When Philip II of Macedon, a brilliant and brutal king, met her, he didn't just see a princess. He saw a mystery he had to possess. Their marriage was a collision of ambition and prophecy. And from that union a legend would be born. Alexander the Great. She intended to shape his destiny from his very first breath. Chapter 2. A Throne of Thorns. The Macedonian court was a den of lions, a place where brothers turned on brothers, and ambition was a blade at everyone's throat. Philip was not a man built for monogamy, and his collection of wives was a constant threat to Olympias and her son. The final blow came when he married a young Macedonian noblewoman, Cleopatra Eurydice. At the wedding feast, Cleopatra's uncle drunkenly toasted to a legitimate heir, a direct insult to Alexander. The insult ignited a fire. Olympias, seeing her son's future threatened, did not retreat into sorrow. She retreated into strategy. She left Macedon not in defeat, but to gather her strength. Then the world shook. Philip II was assassinated at his own daughter's wedding. Was it a jilted bodyguard? Was it a political rival? Or, as many whispered, was it Olympias? No one could prove it, but within days the rival Queen Cleopatra and her infant child were dead, murdered, some say, by Olympias's own hand. The serpent had returned to the palace, and now nothing stood between her son and the throne. Chapter 3. The Regent in the Shadows. As Alexander marched east to conquer the world, Olympias remained in Macedon, a queen without a throne but not without power. She wrote to her son constantly, letters filled not with motherly affection, but with sharp political advice, warnings, and prophetic visions. She reminded him of his true enemies, questioned the loyalty of his generals, and criticized his growing fascination with Persian customs. Back in Macedon, she undermined the regent Antipater at every turn, using her religious authority and deep-rooted alliances to stir opposition. Her whispers could be deadlier than a sword. She saw herself not just as a queen mother, but as the spiritual guardian of her son's divine destiny. And she would let no one, not even an old, trusted general, stand in its way. Chapter 4. The Serpent's Fury. The news of Alexander's death in Babylon was not just the loss of a son, it was the collapse of her world. The empire fractured, and generals like jackals began carving it up. But Olympias was not done. She allied herself with Alexander's widow Roxana and his infant son Alexander IV. They were the last remnants of his bloodline, and she would protect them with the ferocity of a cornered viper. Years later she returned to Macedon at the head of an army, a whirlwind of divine fury. She hunted down her enemies one by one. She ordered the execution of Alexander's mentally impaired half-brother, the puppet king. His wife was given a choice of how to die. For a brief, terrible moment, Olympias held the kingdom in her fist, her vengeance absolute. She reminded Macedon what true royal power looked like, when wielded by a woman with nothing left to lose. Chapter 5. The Final Hiss. But power in Macedon was like fire in dry grass. The general Cassander returned with a larger army, his cruelty colder than her own. Olympias found herself besieged in the fortress of Pydna. For nearly a year she endured a statue of divine wrath, but hunger and disease finally broke her garrison. Cassander, knowing the danger of executing the mother of Alexander the Great himself, turned her over to the families of those she had slain. They condemned her to death. Yet when the executioners came, they froze. They saw not an old woman, but the mother of a god, and they could not raise their swords. Finally, Cassandra sent foreigners' men with no memory of her myth to do the deed. She died not on a throne, but in the dust. Her death marked the end of an era, but her legend, the story of the Serpent Queen, would hiss through the corridors of history forever. Part 3. The Labyrinth of Knossos, a maze of myth and memory. Chapter 1. The Palace that breathed. On the sun-bleached island of Crete lies a ruin that feels more like a dream than a place. This is Knossos, the heart of the ancient Minoan civilization, and the seed from which the myth of the labyrinth grew. Built around 1900 BCE, it was not a fortress, but an entire city under one roof. It had over 1,000 rooms connected by twisting corridors, staircases that led to nowhere, and open-air light wells that allowed the building to breathe. It had running water and what may have been the world's first flushing toilets. To an ancient visitor, it must have felt like magic. To the archaeologist who unearthed it, Arthur Evans, it was the real-life labyrinth. Everywhere he looked, he found images of bulls, painted on walls carved in stone, the sacred animal of the Minoans. But he found no maze. What he found was something far more mysterious, a palace designed to disorient, to inspire awe, and to blur the line between reality and myth. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Minotaur. The myth is unforgettable. A monstrous half-man, half-bull, trapped in a maze so complex that none who entered could ever escape. Only the hero Theseus, with a ball of thread from Princess Ariadne, could slay the beast and find his way out. This story was the Greek explanation for a civilization that was older, wealthier, and stranger than their own. The Minoans dominated the seas, their rituals were alien, and their palaces were bewildering. What if the Minotaur wasn't a literal monster, but a metaphor, a symbol of Crete's terrifying power over its neighbors like Athens, who were forced to pay tribute? The labyrinth then wasn't a physical prison, but the inescapable web of Minoan political and economic control. The monster was the raw and tameable force of a civilization that the Greeks both feared and admired. Chapter 3. A World Without Walls. What is most striking about the Minoans is how peaceful their civilization seems. Their art celebrates nature, not war. We see leaping dolphins, blooming lily, and graceful athletes vaulting over charging bulls in a ritual dance. Their supreme deities were often female, powerful goddesses holding snakes, symbols of rebirth and transformation. At the center of it all was Knossos, a palace with no massive defensive walls. This suggests a people who felt secure on their island, their power projected not by armies, but by trade and influence. Yet for all their sophistication, they left us no stories. Their primary script, linear, remains undeciphered. We don't know what they called themselves, what prayers they whispered, or what led to their eventual downfall. They were architects of mystery, and Knossos was their silent, beautiful masterpiece. Chapter 4. The Fall of a Dream. For centuries, Knossos stood as a beacon of culture and innovation. Then around 1450 BCE, it fell silent. The civilization vanished. What happened? One theory points to a cataclysmic volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern Santorini. The explosion triggered tsunamis and sent ash clouds across the sky, choking crops and crippling the Minoan economy. Another theory suggests invasion by the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, who may have taken advantage of a weakened Crete. Yet the ruins show little evidence of a great battle. Knossos didn't seem to fall with a scream, but with a whisper. The grand palatial system simply ceased to function. The rituals ended, the workshops emptied, and the corridors fell into a profound silence broken only by the wind. The dream of the Minoans was over. Chapter 5. A Question in Stone. Today, to walk through Knossos is to walk through a question. The mystery remains. The labyrinth may not have been a physical maze, but a spiritual one, a journey to the center of a complex sacred world. The Minoans are gone, but their palace endures, not as an answer, but as a beautiful, haunting question carved in stone. It reminds us that some parts of history aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt, and in the silent, winding halls of Knossos, you can still feel the echo of a lost world, a thread of memory leading you deeper into the maze. Part 4. The Engines of Ruin, the Art of the Siege. Chapter 1. The Thunder of the Ram. Before gunpowder, breaking down a castle wall was an art form, a symphony of wood, stone, and terror. At its heart was the battering ram. In its simplest form, it was a massive log carried by soldiers, but engineers soon turned it into a weapon of psychological dread. They mounted the ram inside a wheeled shelter, protecting the crew from arrows and boiling oil. The Assyrians perfected it, turning their rams into slow-moving gods of destruction that rolled up to city gates. The rhythm of the swinging beam was a promise of collapse, a thunderous heartbeat counting down the seconds until the world outside came crashing in. Chapter 2. The Arc of Destruction. While the ram attacked up close, the catapult was the master of distance. These were the first true artillery pieces, weaponizing physics to hurl terror from afar. The torsion-powered ballista like a giant crossbow fired massive bolts. The stone-throwing catapult or onager lobbed boulders in a high arc. But the undisputed king of siege engines was the trebuchet. It didn't use tension, it used gravity. A massive counterweight would drop, whipping a long arm around, and flinging projectiles weighing hundreds of pounds over incredible distances. It wasn't just stones they threw. They launched diseased animals to spread plague, severed heads to shatter morale, and pots of burning pitch that turned night into a vision of hell. The trebuchet was a slow-motion hammer from the heavens, and when its great arm swung, cities held their breath. Chapter 3. The Silent Collapse. Some of the most devastating siege tactics happened in utter silence, deep underground. This was the art of sapping or siege tunneling. Engineers would dig a tunnel beneath an enemy wall, propping it up with wooden beams. Then they would pack the tunnel with flammable material, often pig fat because it burned incredibly hot, and set it ablaze. As the supports burned away, the tunnel would collapse, bringing a massive section of the wall above down with it. Defenders would dig counter-tunnels, leading to desperate claustrophobic skirmishes, fought with shovels and knives in the pitch-dark earth. It was a slow, invisible, and terrifying way to make a fortress weep. Conclusion. The battering rams are now silent museum pieces. The trebuchets stand as skeletal reminders of a bygone era, but the spirit of the siege endures. It has evolved from stone and wood to gunpowder and steel, and now to the digital firewalls and blockades of our modern world. But the core principle remains the same, a relentless pressure at test of will, and the eternal struggle between breaking through and holding on. The stories we heard tonight of the assassin's shadow, the queen's ambition, the labyrinth's mystery, and the engine's fury are more than just tales. They are the echoes of a world that, while distant, still hums with a life of its own. Listen closely here in the quiet of the night. You can still hear them. Now just rest,